Welcome everybody to this session on the future of young alumni engagement in Canada. My name is Christian Robillard, and I was a 2018-2019 TD Insurance Milage Phonics Fellow in Advancement. I'm not contractually obligated to say that, but I always like to test myself. I'm here to introduce Mr. Brian Gawor, CFRE. Brian is the Vice President Fundraising Research at RNL. Brian Gawor is a 20-year higher education veteran who coordinates research efforts for RNL, serving clients in the US, Canada, and the United Kingdom. He has previously served in leadership roles in annual giving and major gifts. Brian has regularly presented at CCAE events. He also hosts the popular Fundraising Voices podcast and is completing his doctorate at Illinois State University. So without further ado, let's give it up for Brian Gawor.
Thanks. Hi. Okay, quick poll. Who's seen me present before? Oh, just one. Okay, good. I'm the weird one, by the way, in the company. So I have the coolest job I think, in philanthropy. The company hired me about 5 years ago to be what I call their hired fundraising nerd. So I spend all day studying you, studying your donors, looking at large data sets, doing research and experiments. So really important thing is that there's probably no weird or crazy question you can ask, and you can feel free to ask them to me afterwards or in an email or on LinkedIn afterwards. I'm absolutely a resource for you. The company just lets me do this. So I appreciate your time today. So we're going to talk about the future of young alumni engagement. And you'll note that I specifically, in the title and also in the survey that we did of your membership, didn't totally buy into the word millennial, and we'll talk a little bit about why that might be. A lot of it resonates with what my friend Derek said this morning. Okay, so first off, I have to thank CCAE, and give you a little perspective on my life, for inviting me to a new city during Pokemon Adventure Week. Anyone? Nobody? No fellow nerds? At 6 o'clock today, I will be going out for Adventure Week. It happens to be a week in which, if you are in a new city and you do things that you haven't done before in your home city, you get a lot of benefit. And so this is how my mind works. I started to think about, well, how did Pokemon Go, something that I do with my kids and I get really into, I like to study big data processes. Pokemon Go was created by a man named Mike Hankey, who's a former Google employee who used his what do they call it, like experimentation time to create a game called Ingress. We all played that. He took our data that we gave him, and then he monetized it, and he's made over $3.6 billion, okay? And every month, a group of 100 very, very nerdy people like me go out to the canal, and I literally dress up as Ash Ketchum. My total number of highest number of pictures taken with a kid on these Saturdays is 16, and I'm hoping to break that record. But I was thinking about like Pokemon Go creates these data clusters, right? And so this is me walking around in Ottawa, and these are little, anybody know what that is? Yeah, Rattata? Oh, that's good. Okay, we got a sub-nerd at least, okay? So the Pokemon sort of cluster in these places, right? And I think about like, how can we use data to see where our alumni are clustering? Where they're doing certain things, where they might be in certain places. Are there certain behaviors that sort of cluster together? And that's one of the big things that we've been working on. Pokemon Go is also a community-based activity that has if anyone's heard about a website called Sylph Road, it's one of the most visited websites right now, and people exchange data, so people actually sign up to mine their phones for data. So there's a community online part, and then there's physical space too as well, right? So it's not just these nerds who are out there playing on their phones. They also like to physically get together, right? And I've actually seen marriage proposals during these events, and it's super fun, right? So it becomes this sort of interesting millennial technology, right, of these different ways. Whenever you find something that has quickly become very popular, you should ask the question, why? And how might I adapt that to what I'm trying to do in terms of marketing or alumni engagement or fundraising? So if you're interested, feel free to read the epic Minecraft and Fundraising, or How to Candy Crush Your Fundraising, also written by me, okay? And you can get them on your phone. So I always do one promise and one disclaimer. Here's my promise to you. Hi, I'm American. I will try very, very hard not to be the next American that tells you how to raise money from Canadians, okay? So I need to just say that, And if I say something that is incredibly American and you don't think applies, raise your hand. You could yell America or something like that. And you got to call me on it, right? Because I don't have experience with Canadian donors at your level. I spent summers here. My family owns a farm right outside London in Lobo, Ontario. So I know a bit about Canada, and I come here a lot, and they invite me back. So I don't mess it up too much. But like as Americans go, I'm super American. Like I dropped $100,000 on a political science degree, and I can literally quote the Federalist Papers to you. Okay, I'm way, way American. So I'm going to promise to try really hard on that. Secondly, we're going to talk today about generational trends. And it's important to recognize that when we talk about a generation, all that is a psychological shortcut for those of us that want to talk about it. The label of a generation doesn't make somebody something. It doesn't take away their individuality. And every one of us, when we say millennials do X or millennials do Y, will have a contrary example. Okay, because we're talking about real human beings that represent individual identities and diversity. So it's most important when we talk about a generation or generations to say, do they do this on average more? Do they do this on average less? Have we heard this, and are there clear differences when we survey or not? And then there's one really important caveat here, and it's called generation creep. Ultimately, we all behave like the young people. And in fact, Pew Research has tracked that tablet usage by people over 65 has tripled in terms of the number of minutes every year for the last 4 years. And that has to do with some changes in iOS and Android that make it easier for people who are not super technologically savvy to use them, and also the fact that it's really hard to not live your life these days without those technologies. So even if you're older, you're adopting those technologies. So does anybody have an older alumnus who is super active on social media? Okay, you're going to see those people, right? Because they have that time, right? So generation creep is real. Anything that we suggest that we might do for millennials probably is just good for everyone. Okay? All right. Has anybody seen Monopoly for Millennials? Where you can forget about real estate? You can't afford it anyway. So the get out of jail card in this game literally says, your cellmate is tired of vlogging about being in jail. Get out of jail. Okay? So it's super insulting. You could just type in Monopoly for Millennials, The View, Whoopi goes off. Like they just go crazy. People were super offended by this, even though it was created by millennials. Okay? Live a little. Collect experience points, not stuff. Experiences, right? Okay? By visiting the hottest destinations first, right? Because what's the number one millennial currency? Anybody know? FOMO. Okay, right? And so you got to think about how these things are different, right? The player who collects the most experience, not the most money, wins. There are literally $200 bills in the game. Okay? So it's using all these sort of assumptions, things Derek talked about that we think about millennials. And it's kind of a problem, because in fact, only 40% of millennials even identify with the word, as opposed to 80% of those aged 51 to 69 who consider them part of the baby boom generation. So really important so that when we think about how are we interacting with young alumni, how are we acting with millennial alumni, that we recognize that this label is just a shortcut for us to optimize our marketing and do things a little bit differently. Okay? By the way, the primary reason why older people are frustrated at these behaviors is that they're not doing what we want them to do. And that indicates generally an opportunity for change, okay? So here's what we did. I was talking with CCAE, and they said, will you come out again and give one of your goofy presentations? And I said, well, why don't we go to the membership? Because we're engaged in this project with a private foundation in the US to do some work with millennials, and I'm going to show you some of the results of that. Some I think are comparable, some are probably not. And we wanted to know how are Canadian colleges and universities engaging young alumni. So we did this survey April to June this year. The responses are literally as of yesterday. How many people took it? Is there anybody here who took it? Thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. Multiple choice and open answers. All ranges of Canadian institutions responded, and the range of institutions roughly matches the actual mix of Canadian institutions, so it's reasonably representative. This is a little low. So if we do it again, we're going to do some cheerleading and get it up. We asked about key tactics, barriers and successes in young alumni engagement, okay? So let's go into some of the data about millennials first, okay? And this is some of the stuff comes directly from Derek's research. I don't know if you knew this, but 40% of millennials participate in recurring giving. 80 is the one where they talk to their kids. 61% talk to their kids about charitable giving in the past year, but 84% don't trust traditional advertising. This whopping 92% of people in that age range, the millennial age range, roughly the class years of 2002 to 2017, based on traditional enrollment age, are signed up for a subscription service, okay? 95% believe friends are the most credible source of product info, and we'll talk a little bit about that in the survey. And then millennials are changing some behaviors. So millennials are more likely to rent, so the age at which millennials buy is delayed. They're more likely to live near a city center. So you hear about these, so by the way, like this whole project for me, I've gone native. So I now live in a loft in Fountain Square area of Indianapolis, and I pay way too much money for this loft in hipster land. There's 4 distilleries and 3 breweries within 1,000 feet. And because I got to hire these people, right? I need people, in the age of many of the people in the room, to be my creative people because we're going to change our company. Skipping car ownership altogether. Cohabitating for longer periods of time. Before marriage or domestic partnership or whatever your state or country allows. Identify as multi, so I was careful on this one because it's like lots of things. Identify as multiracial, identify as multi-political in terms of their background. Changing jobs more often. Moving more often. Making a choice to pay monthly, even when there are resources. And then the last one, which I'm just going to suggest, particularly in the United States, is not a choice, which is debt, and that has to do with our debt crisis, and one that I think it's accurate to say is building with you, right? Debt is increasingly an issue. So this is kind of weird because this kills prospect research, right? What's the first thing we do in prospect research is we look at people's zip code or where they live, okay? I can show you a map of my zip code in the US, and it literally contains the lowest crime part of Indianapolis and the highest violent crime part of Indianapolis within the same zip code. So my zip code is not predictive of rents, backgrounds, anything like that. We look to see, are people moving up within the company, right? What is the Canadian equivalent of change of address, national change of address? Is there one where you notify the Postal Service? Okay, so we're finding in the US, and I don't know what the Canadian statistic is that millennials literally just don't even turn that in. Because I don't want my paper mail, okay? I don't personally. I'm an Xer and I don't, right? So this is changing things, right? Okay, so I asked you this question, and hopefully this is still working. Are you still able to post to it? The question is whether or not my internet is actually working is the question. So there we go. So you could feel free to say some other things. So young, obviously, right? Okay. Earlier, are my Bieber people in here? I had some people respond earlier, so there was some stuff in there, so it didn't make me look too dumb. And this idea of who is an example or who is a key figure, persona, right? Okay. Disenfranchised, that's interesting. Innovator, okay. So this is I've done this about 20 times, and it's like a weird like Canadian stereotype, like you're being way nicer. So I don't know what that means. This is interesting, right? Cultural issues, okay? So feel free to keep responding to that, okay? And I'll send it out to everybody, okay? So the first question we asked in the survey is, how do you define young or millennial alumni at your institution? By the way, I'm not convinced that does anybody have a program called Millennial Alumni Engagement? Like nobody's using the term, okay. So last 5 or 10 years, 10 was by far the most common. There was a couple people who said 15 years. And these labels like graduate of the last decade, gold, okay. Some people were just using an age. Okay, which is kind of interesting. You're thinking about like when people got their degree. You're just using marketing based on their age, which may have some validity. or they're using birth dates, or a couple people described a scenario where there were different ways you could get into the club. So you could be a recent graduate or this old or whatever. Okay, is that pretty much, anybody doing anything odd or different or? Okay, all right. We asked people who responded to the survey where they worked. This was surprising. So this is how people who responded to the survey broke off. Many more people seem to be interested in this issue from the alumni offices than the other places. I don't know if CCAE has more alumni office people in their database. That would be what we call a selection bias. But a lot of the interest other places, US, Canada, US, UK, and Australia, is by fundraisers. Okay? All right. So we asked, how is young alumni engagement staffed at your institution or unit? And for the largest group, those responsibilities are split among several people. Only about a fifth of the respondents said that at their institution there's a dedicated staff member for young alumni engagement. Okay? And then some, in some cases it's part of someone's job. Okay? Is there anyone who has added staff to engage young alumni recently? No? Oh, the concept of adding staff, given your current funding situation, is that a bit silly of me? Is it really? Like, I mean, like people aren't adding staff? I mean, I follow this stuff what the provinces are doing in terms of support and things like that. Okay. So, this is kind of the reality that it's not going to be someone's sole focus. We are seeing in the rest of the world more commonly dedicated positions to this. Okay. Okay. So your phone should have changed. Yell if it didn't. And you now have a 3-choice, well, there's other option. And by the way, if you don't have your phone, you can yell an answer to a friend because I have enabled multiple responses. So if you're sitting next to somebody with a phone, you can respond. So is young alumni or millennial donor giving a priority for your organization? Why do you think it's not a top priority? What? So the focus is on people who can make bigger gifts? Okay. What else? Deliberately decided to focus on engagement. Okay. Right. So that's about how it broke down. Well, it's actually eerily exact almost. Because that one just ended up at one person, right, out of the 20 of you that responded. So it's a priority, but not the top priority, right? So that was kind of what the membership said. Okay. All right, this is the one that shocked me a bit. How soon after graduation do you make your first appeal for support? Okay. And it turns out that about 54% of you wait a year or more to ask young alumni for money. So I have to decide how polite I'm going to be. It's about 25%, so about twice as many of you are doing that than in the US. I know the exact US statistic because I'm the researcher on that. So you're waiting longer. I think in the UK that's probably about similar. We had a company, Buffalo, that was part of our company, and they do phone solicitations to young alumni. And I think that's probably about right. The Oxbridge schools are a little bit more aggressive. Okay. Why are you waiting so long? So I want to ask the question two ways. That's a great reason, but is the exact why because somebody forced you to wait? Like, did you guys make up these policies, or did the president say you have to wait, or is it just tradition? Tradition to wait. Okay, keep going. So you're not silent to them leading up to it. Okay? That's great. Somebody back here?
Yeah, similarly, so hearing from young alum that it's turning them on to get that ask within a few months.
So you had feedback from alumni saying this is too aggressive. Okay? Try to repeat to make sure that the sound can hear. So tradition, concern about people's finances. Do you think other charities are coming after your alumni in this age range or within the first? Does anybody wish they were asking sooner? Some. You're afraid to say it. If you need somebody to prove it to your leadership that you should ask sooner, I'm happy to be that person. Again, I don't know. You could yell America on this. I don't know. Because I think part of this is maybe Canadian culture. I'm very concerned when people wait that we're not setting the normative expectation that giving is part of the lifetime relationship. So part of the lagging young alumni giving situation that we've seen with clients is that they're afraid to ask. Now, I am not suggesting that those asks will go astronomically well. I'm actually suggesting that there is a reason to send out failed appeals. And it gets into the idea of setting, again, the normative expectation that giving will be part of the relationship, even if you're seeing relatively low response rates. Not in this presentation, but in other ones, I will show a graph of the phone pledge rate by class year, and the youngest alumni have the absolute highest pledge rates. Does anybody know why? What? It's easy? Absolutely. You haven't asked them 30 times or more. So it is easy, and if you do your system right, and we were just at British Columbia, and we had the pin pads, and everyone was, so our Canadian credit card rate in phone is like double the rest of the world because you have like such great security and trust, and so that's always really good. But yeah, you haven't asked them 30 times. So an interesting phenomenon. I don't know. We'll have to see. Okay. This is an interesting one. Do you have a coordinated young alumni communication strategy? Sadly, about 65% of respondents said that they do not have one. Okay? That tracks exactly with the rest of the world. So it has, interestingly, gone down. Now, I'm always really careful when I see one of my surveys go down within 1 year. Like, the percentage of American universities that use email to fundraise, I report as 98%. It is 100%. Some people just didn't click right, okay? Like, I don't know of one that doesn't. So you have to take it with a grain of salt. But about twice as many people than do said they don't have a coordinated alumni communication strategy, young alumni communication strategy. I mean, I could think of all kinds of reasons why that might be in terms of, are you going to really drive a lot of funds from that? But I think a lot of times we will complain, as Derek said, about how people aren't doing a thing when we haven't put the resources in to engage them, okay? So part of that is, do you feature stories about younger donors as part of your giving marketing, okay? And unfortunately, only about 20% say that they regularly feature stories of younger or millennial donors. So that does look like an opportunity. This tracks, by the way, with the rest of the world almost exactly. So only about a quarter internationally are we seeing institutions really do a lot with young alumni profiling. Is anybody from McMaster here? They're really good at it. I always like to call them out. It's one Canadian school where I'd work. Do you get blocked by Marcom on this? They say we don't have time, or is it just there's too many big donors we got to profile, or?
Might be more of a pipeline issue, like having the actual stories.
Actually capturing them, getting them? So actually getting some kind of compelling story. Okay. What else? Anyone wants to talk to me about this afterwards? You can actually manufacture these stories super easy. You just send out like a 1 to 3 question survey to your alumni. Just ask them why they give. And you'll instantly get back enough compelling anecdotes about why somebody has chosen to give to immediately tag them and say and write about them. So Great. Okay. All right, so this is going to be a confusing, we're going to have to look at this in the aggregate. Some of you will have to look at this when I send out the PDF. We asked, which have you utilized to reach out to young alumni for engagement and or giving? Also, please click what you believe was most effective. So the blue bar is, did you do it? And the yellow bar is, was it effective? So, you know, tons of people use direct mail, right? But they don't find it super effective for young alumni. You know, moderate number have specific young alumni events, and that was the one that people said was the most effective. Okay? Social media posts, you know, so I would focus on the difference between these bars. This is interesting right here for us. So text messaging campaigns. I don't know exactly how all the laws province by province work with this, but it's blowing up in the US. So in the US, they're using the political text messaging software, which allows us to pretend that they are individual messages. I'm just going to be honest. I know the guy who created the system. But individual responses can be given back. So the texts are sent out in batches, but then a student or a staff member can respond when somebody responds. We get everything. We get like goofy Elvis memes to thank you for, oh, I can't believe I didn't turn my gift in, to I'll be giving on Giving Day, to lots of bad stuff, as you can imagine. But it seems to be a big deal. It's pretty remarkable how high of a percentage you have tried that. So does any of you have a text messaging story? Like they may try it and then drop it? No? Okay. So we have found it super effective to hype things like a Giving Day. Who has a Giving Day? Okay. So strongly recommend that leading up to your Giving Day, you would hype that up with text messaging. We have also found really interesting things where if we can get a text message out to some group of donors as those are ending, just in the last few hours, that it really can drive what we call fence sitters, people who meant to do it but just didn't get to it, and it's a great reminder for them to go ahead and do it. Please do not engage in a text messaging campaign if you do not have a mobile optimized giving page. Okay, and if you don't know what that is, I'll super nerd out with you later. But it has to be easy and quick for people to give, because if the behavior driver is a sort of millennial technology that is low friction like texting, and then you're following it up with a gigantic giving form that has 25 things that you have to fill out and it doesn't work on a mobile device, that is a huge miss. Don't waste your money on the text messaging campaign. You will not get anything other than frustration. Any questions about that? It can also help you build a mobile optimized page. And if your giving page provider tells you that they can't, you should get another one. Said from a giving page provider. Okay. So which have you traditionally asked young alumni to do? So this was really interesting. So this is the list that we provided ranked by the responses. So attending events, volunteering, and then giving. Okay. So I have not done this particular survey in the States or in Australia, but I can guarantee you this would come up to the top, right, in terms of the most common thing. I want you to put a pin in this right here, because I'm going to show you some survey data from about 11,000 millennial alumni. There's a miss there. This was interesting. Are you blocked from doing this? So CCAE signed off on this question. Is asking your alumni to advocate with the government or the province not allowed? Or just not traditionally done? Not traditionally done. You are not categorically legally blocked from doing it in most provinces? Are you?
It depends.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Candidate-based probably, right?
well, recently Canada lessened the rules around like political activities. For a while, it was against the rules to deploy more than I think it was 10% of your assets towards political activities.
Okay.
So actually telling someone to get someone to change a particular piece of
Sure.
legislation and things along those lines. But recently, it's changed. I think those limits either were like just eliminated or they were very specifically like changed in some way due to support rulings.
Yeah, so similar to the thing we experienced in the States, I'm a horrible political science major, is a specific law that was struck down.
I think it's Citizens United.
Hatch, or the Hatch, I don't remember what the name, but there's a specific law, okay. So we thought that was kind of interesting. This right here, being a social media ambassador, has anyone have a successful social media ambassador program at your school? So this can be really interesting. We've been engaging in these experiments where we're saying, if we go and ask for a gift and we don't get it, maybe we would ask the young alumnus. I'd actually like to build it out to older alumni too, to sign on to be we understand you can't give right now, but would you be a social media ambassador? And then define what that is. You know, you'll follow our accounts, you'll post or repost a couple of things each year, and then going back to them later and then asking them again. A couple of schools that have done that have found that non-responsive group, there's substantial donations that come from those people. Not everybody that you sign up to be a social media ambassador will do it, but when you ask them for a gift later, the guilt that they didn't do what they said they were going to do may drive some giving. Okay. I'm that guy, sorry. Okay. Okay, cool. All right, so I hope your phone changed. So let's have a little group powwow. I'm always super nervous that like my internet connection is out. Did anybody submit something already? Raise your hand when you click send. Ah, there we go. Okay. So low attendance, they don't update your information. Being able to respond to all their needs, is that like career services or other things?
Just wanting really personalized concierge service.
Yes.
And not being able to fully deliver.
You're just not staffed to really be able to do that, okay? University email not in use. They go on to other schools in terms of, and again, call America on this, graduate or, because I know the difference between a college and university just vaguely. But going on like leaving, like failing out, or no, going to the next degree. Okay, all right. Email open rates, interesting. The majority of your young alumni are international students, so somebody has had an enrollment shift. Okay. So you have colleges within the university decentralized doing all kinds of stuff and you can't keep track of what people are doing? Okay. The traditional stuff we do doesn't interest them? Yeah, this is interesting. So this came up a bunch in the responses to the survey because we asked the same question. Like, all we really can do is our communication plan. We don't actually have the ability to do special communication plans for any group because we're just sort of at capacity, okay? Knowing their real interests. Ooh, I'm about to blow your mind with that, okay? All right. So these are the big things, and I'm sorry, I thought I moved that line. Contact information was by far the thing that people in the survey said most often, followed by staff, followed by these people are simply not trained or interested or traditionally give. Stresses on the alumni's time, money, and being under debt. A number of people indicating that there really wasn't engagement from advancement or the alumni program or the lifetime relationship while people were in school. I know that you have a couple provinces that are experiencing some acute and severe economic shifts. So jobs, the economy, general. Rise of rents in some of the places where your alumni are clustered. The events or outreach are just too boring or just general to all alumni, like I said. We can't dial in the right messaging, and it's too hard for people to give because it's not mobile optimized, register, engage. So what I did is I took, this is what everybody said, and I just kind of said, okay, what are the topics kind of in a loose order of what was most common? So you have, of the most restricted contact restrictions in the world, yet this is number one every time I do this type of survey. So I do think that we're looking at a group that is either not affirmatively opting in or there's some statistic that like American Millennials create a new email address every 8 weeks, right? And it's a strategy, right, of being able to curate your content or use it for different reasons and things like that, right? In the US, of course, we can use aggregated data and track down those emails. It's illegal here. We have too many people making too much money doing it in the US. So, yeah, so I was on a call the other day, and one of my operations people was telling me, we can't quickly determine from a list of phone numbers which ones are mobiles. So I said, I wonder if I was a Social Security fraud scammer. How quickly could I take a list of phone numbers and determine if they were mobiles? Do you know how long it took me? For a 10,000 person list? 6 minutes, $48. Okay? So, we might want to watch some of the things we say. Now, I mean, what's the accuracy of that? It may not be something R&L would ever buy into because I'm sure the accuracy rate is not super good, but I was like, what if I was a scammer and I needed this? And it was super easy to do. By the way, I didn't upload a bunch of American alumni phone numbers. I stopped before I blindly threw some phone numbers into a scam database. Okay. What degree do you feel that the following things are barriers to young alumni for giving to the university or college? Apologies to any secondary school or private school people. We didn't do a good job segmenting the list, but I'm going to help CCAE address your vertical a little bit more. So I'm sorry for that. So if you look at the somewhat of the blue plus the orange kind of combine, what we see is economics, so the broad economy. And then this was interesting. So I feel like maybe in some ways that may be the difference between Canada and America on this issue. Like a lot of you said it was somewhat of a barrier, but nobody clicked a major barrier, right? CCAE thought that institutional policies were going to be much more of a barrier because they had been hearing from members that cannabis policies and other policies on transgender students, for example, were coming up as a reason. This is obviously big. Other charities are more exciting. Okay. I wrote this incredibly hotly debated. Mark is the head of CCAE, right? So there's like 6 emails to write this. Education has been predominantly government funded, and giving is not seen as necessary. You should have seen all the versions of it. I started with education was free, and he like slapped my hand. Education is never free, you know. But that's my very, very tactful way to phrase that question. So it's interesting that maybe these things may be more predominant. Okay? All right. So the policy issues, we did ask people social policies on campus. So what were the policies that were more controversial? People totally ignored the fact that we said social policies and just gave other things, like friction for giving and cost. Controversial professors who had been in the media was a fairly common thing. Okay? All right. So based on your experience, please rate the following reasons as to whether you believe that they are compelling to young alumni of your institution as a reason to support the school. So this was really interesting. So again, you're looking for where are the highest blue and orange. Contributions help open the University of College to the world. And positive social change by the university were seen as the top things. So it's interesting because it's so much of what Derek was talking about this morning, I think you all sort of recognize. Okay? A reasonable number of people thought that increasing the standing of the university, but again, that was also a high number of people who said not compelling at all. And very few of you believe that the decline in federal or provincial support is an effective way to get millennials to give. Have you tried it? Okay. Is it just something you wouldn't try? American universities, public universities like nuts, just quote how much the state cut the budget and send it out in appeals. I don't know that it's effective or not effective, but is that just something you wouldn't do? It's too political. So there's this, help me out, because again, like Chicago guy, I don't, like, too political for me is not actually punching the guy.
And I don't want to speak for all, but the sense I get is it would be too political in a direct appeal to say the premier is cutting, you know, these things, and that's going to affect
Interesting. So you have to come at that more tactfully and say, this is our budget scenario, or the budgets are tight. Okay. It's interesting. You would never do that. Okay. Bite the hand that feeds you. It's interesting, huh? That's interesting. I think that's an interesting, it is interesting that the things that you think are the most effective so resonate with the things that Derek was saying, right? Okay. So we asked, which message, I think I had a font change or something. Does it look good on my screen? What message do you think have been most effective? So by far, peer-to-peer and impact messaging. A bunch of people saying that the alumni, we've tracked what they click on and they just read news about their classmates. In our surveying of about 11,000 American millennial alumni, they were like 5 times more likely to say that they wanted to hear about classmates than what the current professors are doing. So professors from their time rated higher, but the assumption that people who want to hear about professors or activity that isn't related to their peer group or their time is a bit of a miss. So I just like, this is exactly what somebody said, and if you're in the room. This is an example, by the way, of a great marketing tactic. A lot of people indicating that the messages they felt needed to be shorter for younger alumni. Networking and involvement. Again, that short part. And then, why did I say career development? Career development, I'll fix that. Career development was big, okay? So what have you done well? A number of people indicating that early engagement, when people arrive, is really powerful. So bringing out the development, advancement, lifetime engagement message pretty early. Emphasizing that lifetime connection, career development, engagement with current students. Does anybody have any fun way that you allow alumni to engage with current students? Mentorship, advice, notes, right? You do? You used to have a hockey tournament between the students, and did they fight or something? Why did you used to? Was that out like a hockey? Sorry, I would be nice about hockey. I realize where I am. You had to cancel it because it got too heated? Yeah, so it's interesting. You can find something that's super popular, right? And I'll, again, nerd out and give you my Pokemon Go example. Anybody know what a Charizard is? They released one for the first time, so that it popped in the world, and it shut down traffic in LA because people just ignored streets and like the nerds just lost their minds, okay? So I do think sometimes you can find something that's incredibly compelling, but you probably can't keep doing. Yeah, that's interesting. I would focus on like what was most exciting about that, right? Maybe there's something. Interesting, even just a couple years ago, I don't think we would have seen crowdfunding, but that seems to be pretty popular. And then a lot of people talking about targeted young alumni content, okay? All right, so that's kind of the survey. Where would you like to go next? Does anybody want to bring up a topic or ask a question? Go ahead.
I'm curious if you were able to drill down even more and ask clients or institutions how the results would differ if there were institutions that are currently engaging with students or have a student engagement strategy. Would those results change?
How they feel about their alumni and young alumni. Yeah, so we need to do that next, right? So just to give you some idea, we will, in about 3-4 weeks, launch an international survey of student philanthropy programs that I'm writing with CASE. And you all, if you're in our database, you will all be encouraged to do that, and I'll put a tag in there for Canadian institutions. But I think that that's a really, really key point, that student philanthropy programs we see tend to really bleed into a lot of young alumni engagement. The student philanthropy programs have become more and more popular. And we have actually, in the company, just decided that that's going to be a thing that we're going to do. Because in any given night, for the last 20 years, we've had 8,000 of your students, in many cases, great Canadian institutions, calling alumni. And we found that like a student who engages in this type of activity is 3 to 4 times more likely to give later, right? Because they've made the ask. Now, by the way, they're horrible phone prospects. So it does not translate. If people are phone-a-thon callers, they don't then pick up the phone and give to, but if we dial them, they get reminded and they just give online. Because it's like, it doesn't work on them because they've done it, right? But the other part about it too is philanthropy coursework. Does anybody have a philanthropy course at their school at the undergraduate level? So the stats on that are mind-blowing. Within 5 years of taking a philanthropy course, so this would be a course where they study philanthropy but then also get to give money or volunteer for an organization. That's the definition. About 90% of those people are giving and 40% of them are on nonprofit boards. So if you can get a faculty member at your institution to launch a philanthropy course, or you have the ability to advocate for that, it can be incredibly effective in sort of changing that vibe, that culture of philanthropy. Yeah, I think it's going to be big. Go ahead. Yes, okay. I have a bunch of information and we can talk later. So I don't have as much information on how fundraisers say, like, we have an association if we don't. The general trend is that the alumni associations are being folded into the main advancement effort. In some cases, that means that the Alumni Association is decorporating and becoming part of the institution, but at minimum, they're working better together. So the advancement office is providing staff, resources, things like that. The interest in this generation in joining an alumni association seems to be very low. So while they are subscribing and doing other things like that, it's to things like wine and food. It's not, and if anybody has seen the American NRA is a perfect example. I'm not trying to be political at all, but like literally they're falling apart, right? Because buying into a membership seems to be a bit alien to the mindset. However, subscribing to Pandora, Netflix, Hulu, sharing that with friends is an incredible part of the mindset. So it seems like the Alumni Association itself is not a millennial optimized technology. In regards to events and working with other people, it's pretty clear that drinks with the provost or president is over and nobody really cares. Apologies to any provosts or presidents that are in the room. You would be well served to bring a senior faculty member or somebody cool with you and you'll see more people. It also seems, so this is, by the way, the survey in which the word pub is most used of any survey I've ever done. And I've done hundreds of them. So it does seem that you're having success with pub events. Okay, and I think that could be a particularly Canadian culture issue. We're seeing in other places that those events tend to move more towards affinity groups. So an example would be all the finance or College of Business students grouping up for an event with a notable financial expert, okay, right? So I think that there's a lot of things about that. Do you have chapters, separately incorporated chapters? You're trying, okay. So there's Stacy Hyatt wrote a book called Fully Funded that came out just a little while ago, and it chronicles the effectiveness of the most effective separately incorporated chapter organizations. It is, again, it's America. But I think there are things that you can draw from that. And I was talking with her when she was writing the book, and I'm on the back cover. But she's neat, okay? All right, what else? I'm gonna show you something funny. Do you guys track alumni participation? Yeah? Okay. So this is alumni participation, right? Number of alumni donors divided by alumni of the living, right? Well, I wrote this definition. Let me read it to you. Well, alumni gifts count, and then we definitely soft credit your alumnus, spouse, partner, significant other. And oh, seniors, and if your parent makes a gift in your honor, then your senior year, we count that as, and we count you as an alumni and a giver because it's only fair. And also, if you gave through a donor advised fund or your smallish company or family foundation, we count you and all your siblings and cousins. And also, if you bought a license plate, we count you because our president knows the MP and she got the list, even if that school we played against, I should put hockey, last weekend didn't get their list. And also, Alumni Associations count, and we make them send us the list. And also, sometimes people have parties at their house, and then they sing karaoke, and an alumni put money in a jar, and then we take some DNA samples from that. And then also sometimes we tack on gifts to event registrations, and we count those. But yeah, it's an affirmative opt-out. You have to click twice to not do the gift, which is pretty fair because I heard on CBC that it is. And also, you can give us your boat and spread it over 2 fiscal years. And also, yeah, hockey gifts count. Okay. So creative counting, right? So everything mentioned here, I have heard over the last 5 years. Okay, over this, the denominator. Well, we start with anyone who attended more than a number of credits, but we definitely count you if you have any credits and you also give us money. And then also check to make sure everyone is still living through, I used American word, sorry, death database before June 30th. And we take people out of the denominator, especially when it's been a bad winter, but not people who gave before they died this year, because that's only fair. We count you if we only count you if you solicit you, but that doesn't really mean if we have like some phone number or some email like bronybro24@gmail.com. How do we know it's yours? And some people are also still mad about that missed field goal, so we took them off. And a VP a few times ago told us to just not do data cleansing on people who hadn't given in 10 years, so do we really know these people still exist? And I also heard this really rich guy moved to Pakistan, but he doesn't give us money, so whatever. Okay. So as a result of this concept of alumni participation becomes a bit hazy. The problem with a lot of this discussion is that we're focusing on what the fundraisers are doing. This is the alumnus. Okay? So I got the postcard in the mail about Giving Day, and I put it on the fridge, but then it got covered up by Janie's picture from class, and isn't it great? She should be an artist. And then this kid called, and he was nice, and he said I could give my credit card, but then the dog started barking, so I said, call me back, and now I'm going online and looking at this stuff about the college so I can give in honor of my professor. And Janie, don't pound on the keyboard when I'm trying to make a donation. And wait, I wonder if the license plates we bought count, because I heard from the alumni participation thing is a big deal, and we definitely need to beat this other school because I heard the video game where the president was killing alligators, and I guess that's pretty cool, but probably better for some maritimer. Did I get it right? Okay, and where can I sign up monthly? Because that would be easier, and yes, I'm going to GiveGear. It's just a cannabis company who gave them money, but seriously, wait, didn't they send me something in the mail? I guess it's in the bill basket. I'll just do it later. Yes, Janie, that's an alligator. Yes, click that, click the alligator. And also, homecoming? Okay, so all the different ways that alumni are distracted or the spouse is angry, and then the kid is on the keyboard, right? But the interesting thing about it is that the denominator has no confusion at all because they're wearing your t-shirts, hanging out at events, and buying keychains, right? So alumni totally know whether they're alumni. They're just facing time, attention, all the stuff you said in the survey, friction, right? Okay? And it was interesting when we asked 11,000 millennial alumni if they had given. And this was a non-anonymous survey. So we actually knew if they had given, and we asked them anyway. And the rate at which people had given but said they haven't, or hadn't given and said they had, so we're using the institution's last gift date, 30%. So what is giving? How are you counting it? Okay, starts to get really interesting. So just a quick teaser, we have surveyed millennial alumni and we found that peer influence is very strong. Time-sensitive solicitations like Giving Day and crowdfunding really do matter. And that education is an absolute top priority, but your particular institution may not be. 46% of millennials say they have donated to crowdfunding campaigns. Okay. 55% of colleges are now using crowdfunding. 75 are using Giving Days, okay? And we asked, I mean, this includes Canadian partners, okay? So we asked people what causes they support. And we found that there was a whole bunch of things that you do as universities. Of course, you're an educational organization. But when we segment the list by donors versus non-donors, these 3 things come up as higher for the non-donors. I revealed this insight At Wellesley College in Massachusetts, is anyone a graduate? To suggest that social justice is a thing at Wellesley is a grand understatement. It's Hillary Clinton's college, one of the first institutions to recognize transgender students. They are incredibly social justice oriented. Yet their alumni who indicate that social justice is a top priority were giving at a lower rate. This is what we call a marketing miss, okay? We asked these alumni, where do you want to give? And what I can tell you is that institution to institution, alumni are about 10 to 25 times more likely to indicate interest in a specific scholarship and financial aid, department, or student organization campaign other than the general annual fund. Go ahead. Okay, 5 minutes. So one of the questions we're asking is the single broad general unrestricted repeal, as these alumni become a greater and greater part of our database, just over? I'm happy to take a call with somebody who's pressuring you on unrestricted giving and let them know that it probably is. Now, does that mean that these types of pitches can't be folded into an unrestricted or budget relieving campaign? Absolutely not. There have been people who have been very successful with that, and there's ways to do that. But the idea that people would give just because you have an annual fund seems to be of the lowest priority for this generation. And we're going to build this out to 50 more institutions, and we'll tell you more as we find out, okay? So I think the big question is what's next? Those surveys that we did right there were not anonymous. We made no indication to the alumni that we were not tracking their identities, and they set the record for the highest number of characters ever typed into open response fields of any survey that my company has done, and if you know us, we do a lot, okay? So they were very willing to share their opinions. We think that part of the solution is to move away from the idea of this appeal is better than that appeal and say, I am going to drill down and select the 141 social justice-oriented non-givers and send them appeal related to what our professors and students are doing in that area. Maybe it's children, maybe it's healthcare, maybe it's research, something like that. So basically what I'm saying is that as a researcher and a fundraising strategist, I'm over segmentation. It basically no longer exists in my strategic toolkit. It's really this idea of how do we target marketing to specific groups. Okay, so I hope thank you all for responding to the survey. We are going to take the survey results and put them into a PDF. I did want to talk to more of you at the conference before I wrote my insights, because again, I got this America thing going. So I wanted to make sure that, and thank you for teaching me some things. Are there questions before we finish up? Go ahead. No, I need Canadian institutions to come up to me afterwards and say they want to do this survey. So I'm ready to rock and roll. It's built, it's ready to go, and we would be able to do that. But we have. So that preliminary data is the 5 of the top 10 ranked liberal arts colleges in the United States. I won't give their names, but every one of them has over $1 billion in the bank. Okay, so that survey is significantly biased to people who bought a liberal arts education and spent significant funds or were funded by someone for that. So now as we go out and we start to see these big university and big tenure, that's what I want to find out is that particular thing. So one of the things that I can tell you is that African American alumni in that particular survey were about 3 times more likely to indicate that colleges should focus on career needs. But that did not break down based on indicated income. So it was not, we don't think, alumni saying, you didn't provide me what I needed to get ahead. We think it might be that alumni are more likely to go into communities where that is more of a concern. So again, part of what Derek said, what are people doing in their lives that resonates with what you're doing in terms of how you can affect things? So we think it's going to be different. It's pretty clear when we look at that there are, in many cases, 2 campuses. So when we separate from majority students and students of color, opinions are quite different. When we build the survey out and we particularly go into the American South, and I think there may be, I'm not going to even try to give the Canadian examples, but I think there are some areas where we would see the same thing, where we might see 3 or 4 or 5 campuses. So these students, for example, basically said, tear down any statue you want. That's not going to happen in the SEC in the South of the United States. There's going to be people who are very animated separately from that. So I think we're going to see sort of as it comes out and comes forward. the big thing for me is to say, try to construct the survey in a way where you don't presume what the answer is going to be. So a lot of the insights for us came from the open response, where people were saying, very, very deliberate things. One institution, just to wet your whistle on how effective this could be, took the people who said they were interested in a specific thing and then went out there and marketed just with appeals deliberate to that. That institution themselves already has their young alumni giving at the same rate of their overall alumni giving. So we believe that it will be highly effective. Okay? All right. So I spend a lot of time on this. I don't know if people have ever heard the podcast, but I bring a lot of people into that. So you just type fundraising voices on your phone. You can hear a lot about these sorts of things. Actually, in my first 10 episodes, I think 3 of them were Canadians. Maria, she was at York. I think she moved. But there's a lot more stuff on this out there. Okay, so we are going to release the results of the survey, but I don't have to do this in the US because I can just market the heck out of people. I need you in some way to affirmatively opt into getting them. So if you would please either leave your card or connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'll just check to see who connected with me on LinkedIn, and we'll make sure that everybody gets the download link. CCAE will also send out something, but I just want to make sure that people don't miss the opportunity to get it, okay? And then please provide me feedback, and then also CCAE feedback about what we should survey next year, because I'm up for whatever. Thanks, everybody, for all your time.
Thank you again,
1 minute
Brian,
over.
for a fantastic session. I think you've given us a lot of food for thought, a lot of things to think about and bring back to our institutions to challenge what we're already doing. Just a small token of our appreciation.
Oh, thank you
for
very much.
coming here to speak today.
Thank you very much.
This is the last session for the day, so you have a bit of a break. A reminder that the buses leave at 5:15 from Brian. So